Temecula's morning sun lazily filtered through the blinds into the police department building on the corner of Rancho California Road. The decrepit air conditioner hummed, unable to cope with the July heat, and the smell of stale coffee, sweat, and paper dust created the typical aroma of a provincial police station. The detective department was on the second floor, a spacious room with rows of desks separated by low partitions that gave the illusion of privacy, but in reality hid nothing. Detective Jabari Merker sat at his desk, deep in thought, studying the crime scene photos. The 33-year-old investigator with 8 years of experience was considered one of the department's most productive detectives, though few could boast that they really knew him. Tall, with an athletic build and short-cropped hair, Merker kept to himself. His gaze was always focused, and his voice was soft but commanding. Colleagues respected his professionalism, but called him the Ghost. He showed up, did his work, and disappeared, never participating in office gatherings or weekend barbecues. Merker, any news on the Hobbs case? Captain Rodriguez, a stocky man with a large bald patch, interrupted his musings. Working on a few leads, Captain. Merker replied, straightening up. Informant said there's a big shipment coming in at the end of the week, working on the details. Latrell Hobbs has already walked away from us twice for lack of evidence. Rodriguez shook his head. This time we need an ironclad case. No procedural errors. I understand, Merker nodded. He's not going away this time. The captain chuckled and was heading toward his office when the department doors opened and a young officer in an impeccably pressed uniform walked in. He stopped on the threshold, looking around the room. Officer Dontavius Coltrane, he introduced himself, walking over to the nearest detective. Transferred from Riverside, looking for Lieutenant Gaines. Merker looked up fleetingly, then back to the photos, but after a second he looked at the newcomer more closely again. The young officer, barely 23, looked inappropriately perfect for this shabby precinct. His dark skin glowed with health. His eyes radiated that special enthusiasm that usually evaporates after the first year of service. His movements were as crisp as a cadet fresh out of the academy. The lieutenant will be here in 15 minutes, Merker said, rising from his desk. I'm Detective Merker. You can wait for her at my desk. Coltrane smiled, showing off his flawless teeth. Thank you, Detective. Heard about you in Riverside. The serial robbery case was impressive. Merker nodded, unaccustomed to direct praise. Have a seat, officer. Coffee? No, thank you, sir. Trying to avoid caffeine. Commendable, Merker replied and went back to his paperwork, but occasionally glanced at the young officer who was looking at the investigation board on the wall. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Shanika Gaines entered the department, a short, energetic woman in her 40s with an afro hairdo and a piercing stare. She stopped when she spotted Coltrane. You must be the prodigy from Riverside, she said in lieu of a greeting. Come into my office, Officer Coltrane. And Merker, you too. Gaines' office was small but perfectly organized. Awards and certificates hung in strict order, and there was nothing extra on the desk. Officer Coltrane, I've reviewed your file, Gaines began when everyone was seated. Impressive record for your age. Why the transfer? I wanted to work on more serious cases, ma'am, Coltrane replied. They kept me on patrol in Riverside despite my qualifications. Gaines nodded. Merker, you need a partner for the Hobbs case. Coltrane is familiar with narcotics investigations, albeit at a junior level. Show him how the big boys work. Merker clenched his jaw. With all due respect, Lieutenant, this is a sensitive investigation. I prefer to work alone. And I prefer my detectives to follow orders, Gaines retorted. Coltrane, you will assist Merker and learn from him. Merker, by the end of the day, I expect a plan for your next steps on your desk. Dismissed. Leaving the office, Merker silently headed for his desk, and Coltrane followed, maintaining a respectful distance. I understand that you prefer to work alone, Detective, he said quietly, when they were a good distance from Gaines's office. I promise to stay out of the way and do what you say. Merker looked at him for a long moment. I hope so, officer. Meet me in an hour outside my car. We'll take a short tour of the Hobbs compound. Coltrane nodded and went to draw up the transfer papers, and Merker, after giving him a glance, opened a desk drawer and discreetly took out a vial of pills. In a quick movement, he put 2 pills in his mouth and drank water from the glass on the table. Taking a deep breath, he returned the vial to its place and closed the drawer. Still taking those things, Merker? Came a voice behind him. The detective turned around and saw Detective Darius Baptiste leaning against the partition of his cubicle. 40-year-old Baptiste was the complete opposite of Merker, heavy-set, with a perpetually crumpled shirt and a greasy smile. His eyes, small and close-set, were always searching for secrets. "Vitamins," Merker replied briefly. "What can I do for you, Baptiste?" "Just wondering about the new kid." Baptiste nodded in the direction where Coltrane had disappeared. "Nice-looking boy. Young, ambitious. Just your type, huh, Merker?" Merker's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you mean." Baptiste smirked. "Come on, Merker. I've been watching you for a long time. Not one girlfriend in all the years. No partying with the girls when we're away at conferences. You always keep to yourself. But you do look at the boys once in a while. Like right now, our new guy." "Don't you have anything better to do, Baptiste?" Merker asked coldly. "Just a friendly conversation." Baptiste held up his hands. "We're colleagues. We should know each other's secrets so we can watch each other's backs, right?" He winked and walked back to his desk, and Merker gave him a tense look. The perpetually nosy and corrupt Baptiste was dangerous. Everyone knew about his ties to local crime, but no one had proof, and now he clearly suspected something. An hour later, Merker and Coltrane were driving in an inconspicuous squad car through the eastern part of Temecula, a neighborhood of shabby houses and neglected yards. Merker drove silently, occasionally pointing out significant locations related to the Hobbs case. "Latrell Hobbs controls drug trafficking in 3 neighborhoods," he explained. "Started in small retail 5 years ago, now runs a network of about 25 dealers. He's been investigated twice, but both times the case fell apart because of intimidated witnesses." "How dangerous is he?" Coltrane asked, making notes in his notebook. "Enough to keep the neighborhood in fear, but not enough to attract the attention of the feds," Merker replied. "Smart, careful, never touches the product himself. Uses underage couriers who are hard to prosecute seriously." They stopped in front of a small bar with a sign that read, "Moe's." The chipped paint and flashing neon sign gave the impression of abandonment, but there were 2 stout men standing at the entrance, keeping a watchful eye on the street. "His main gathering point," Merker explained. "Here he meets with suppliers and gives instructions to dealers. It's technically a legitimate business owned by his cousin." "There's Hobbs himself," Coltrane said quietly, nodding at the black SUV that pulled up. A short, thin man of about 35 got out of the car. Despite the heat, he was dressed in dark jeans and a light jacket. His movements were fluid, and his gaze was constantly scanning his surroundings. "Never misses a detail," Merker observed. "Always alert. Now he will notice our car. 3, 2, 1. As if hearing his words, Latrell Hobbs turned his head and looked straight at them. Even from a distance, they could see his cold smile. He raised his hand in a welcoming gesture and slowly made his way toward their car. "Is he coming this way?" Coltrane tensed. "Yes. Hobbs likes to play cat and mouse. Don't say anything, just watch." Hobbs walked to the car and leaned against the open window on the driver's side. "Detective Merker," he said in a slight Louisiana accent. "What a pleasant surprise. Decided to take a peek at my humble business?" "Just passing through, Hobbs," Merker replied calmly, showing the new officer around the neighborhood. Hobbs shifted his gaze to Coltrane and smiled slowly. "Fresh blood, huh?" He extended his hand through Merker's. "Latrell Hobbs, law-abiding businessman. Welcome to Temecula, officer?" "Coltrane," the young officer replied, shaking his hand reluctantly. "Coltrane," Hobbs repeated, as if tasting the name. "I'll remember it. And you, Merker, you look tired. Still having trouble sleeping at night?" There was clearly an implication in his words. Merker's face remained unchanged, but his hands on the steering wheel tensed slightly. "Work, Hobbs. You know how it is." "Oh, I know." Hobbs nodded. "Work, stress, health. It's all so important, isn't it?" "How's your health, by the way, detective?" "Can't complain," Merker replied coldly. "That's good." Hobbs straightened up. "Well, I won't keep the officers on duty. Officer Coltrane, nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll see each other again." He backed out of the car and headed for the bar, and Merker started the engine. "He knows we're investigating," Coltrane said. "Of course he does," Merker nodded. "But this time we'll surprise him." They drove over a few more places connected with Hobbs's activities before returning to the station. All day, Coltrane followed Merker, absorbing information and methods of operation. By evening, a fragile professional rhythm had developed between them, with the older detective giving short orders and the younger officer carrying them out without question. When most of the staff had gone home, Merker and Coltrane remained in the empty office, working on a map of Hobbs's connections. "I think that's enough for today," Merker finally said, rubbing his tired eyes. "We'll continue tomorrow." "Detective, may I ask you a personal question?" Coltrane asked suddenly. Merker tensed. "What was it? What did Hobbs mean by asking about your health? Is it some kind of threat?" Merker froze for a moment, then slowly shook his head. "Hobbs likes psychological games, trying to find weaknesses. Ignore him." He started to gather the paperwork, but Coltrane didn't move. "Detective, I want you to know. I'm here for a reason. I don't just want a promotion. I want to learn from the best, and Riverside says you're the best." Merker looked up, surprised by the sincerity in the young officer's voice. "Coltrane, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but this is dirty work. There are no heroes here, only those who do the job day in and day out." "I understand." Coltrane nodded. "And I'm willing to learn." Their gazes met, and for a moment there was a kind of understanding between them that went beyond the usual working relationship. Merker was the first to avert his eyes. "See you tomorrow, officer." Coltrane nodded and headed for the exit, but turned around at the door. "Detective, thanks for today." When Coltrane left, Merker was alone in the half-dark office. He pulled out a vial of pills and stared at it for a long time before taking his evening dose. 8 years he'd lived with the diagnosis. 8 years on medication, hiding the truth and keeping to himself. And now this young officer with a genuine smile and ambition. Merker shook his head, pushing the unwelcome thoughts away. No affection should be allowed. No secrets should be jeopardized. A week of working together passed. Merker and Coltrane methodically gathered information about Hobbs's activities, preparing for a serious operation to apprehend him. Contrary to initial misgivings, Merker found that Coltrane proved to be a valuable partner, attentive, intelligent, and surprisingly unobtrusive. Gradually, the wall of alienation between them began to crumble. On Friday evening, after a particularly productive day, they were the last ones in the office. Merker noticed that Coltrane looked worried. "Something wrong, officer?" he asked, setting aside a file folder. Coltrane sighed. "I have a physical tomorrow morning, annual checkup for all transferred employees." "And that's a problem?" Merker raised an eyebrow. "No, it's just, I don't like hospitals," Coltrane tried to smile. "A childhood memory, an unpleasant experience with a blood test." Merker nodded. "I understand. But it's standard procedure, no big deal." "I know." Coltrane stood up. "Detective, I was thinking, maybe we could grab a coffee? Not at the station, but somewhere in the city. I'd like to discuss the case in a less formal setting." Merker froze. The suggestion was innocent, but something in Coltrane's voice, in his gaze, said more. Or was he just imagining it? "Yeah." Before Merker could finish his sentence, Coltrane's cell phone rang. The young officer looked at the screen and frowned. "Sorry, it's the hospital." He stepped back and answered. "Officer Coltrane." "Yes, yeah, I remember about the checkup tomorrow." "What? But I thought we weren't going to know the results until tomorrow." "Okay, I understand. Yes, I'll be there as soon as possible." He ended the conversation and turned to Merker. His face was pale. "Did something happen?" Merker asked. "The doctor wants to see me today. He says there's something wrong with the preliminary tests and they want to take more samples." Coltrane's voice sounded strained. "Sorry about the coffee, Detective. Rain check?" "Sure," Merker nodded. "Go on. Your health is more important." Coltrane nodded and headed quickly for the exit. Merker glanced at him, feeling vaguely uneasy. Something about the situation made him remember the day 8 years ago when he himself had received a call from the hospital asking him to come in to discuss his test results, the day that had changed his entire life. Dontavius Coltrane sat in the waiting room of the clinic, tapping his fingers nervously on his knee. The clock on the wall showed the beginning of 9 p.m., but the Temecula Police Department Medical Center was open 24 hours a day. The nature of the service required that medical care be available at all times. The sterile cleanliness of the facility and the smell of antiseptic, evoked Coltrane's childhood memories of the endless hospital hallways where he spent time while his mother, a nurse, finished her shift. "Officer Coltrane," came a voice from the office. "Come in, please." Dr. Elijah Morton, a graying man with thin-rimmed glasses, looked tired. He gestured for Coltrane to sit down and close the office door. "Thank you for coming so quickly," the doctor began, sitting down across from him. "I've gotten your test results back, and there are some indicators that are troubling." Coltrane swallowed. "What exactly are they, doctor?" Morton took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture Coltrane instinctively recognized as preparation for an unpleasant conversation. "Officer Coltrane, your blood test showed the presence of HIV antibodies." The room seemed to shrink to the size of the eye of a needle. Coltrane felt his breath catch and his ears ring. It's a mistake," he squeezed out. "There has to be a mistake." "I double-checked the results," Morton replied gently. "But we'll run a confirmatory test to be sure. I need to take another blood sample." Coltrane looked at the doctor, but he didn't see him. He saw his whole life crumbling before his eyes. The police career he'd worked so hard to build, his dreams of promotion, his future. How was that possible? He mumbled. "I mean, I'm healthy. HIV can go for years without showing symptoms," Morton explained. "When was the last time you were tested?" "About a year ago, when I joined the Riverside Police Department. Everything was fine." The doctor nodded. "So the infection occurred within the last year. You should let your partners know?" Coltrane's thoughts suddenly focused on one name, Jabari Merker. Their relationship had begun just 3 months ago, a chance meeting outside of work, a glance, a conversation that led to something more. Everything was secret, discreet. 2 black police officers in a conservative town couldn't afford openness. And Merker had always insisted on defending himself. Or had he? Memory suddenly threw up a few episodes when the defense was absent. It was rare, but it happened. And the pills Merker was taking. Vitamins, as he called them. Merker, who never talked about his past, his former partners. Merker, with his strange aloofness. "Officer Coltrane?" The doctor's voice brought him back to reality. "Can you hear me?" "Yes," Coltrane answered hoarsely. "Yes, I understand. Modern therapies are very effective," Morton continued. "With the right therapy, you can lead a full life. The viral load can become undetectable, which greatly reduces the risk of transmission. Undetectable viral load." Coltrane had heard that phrase before. From who? Merker? During one of their conversations? "I have to go," Coltrane said suddenly, rising. "When are the results of the confirmation test coming back?" "In a day or 2. But officer, we need to discuss treatment options, psychological support." "Later," Coltrane cut him off. "I'll be back after the confirmation test." He walked out of the office, feeling anger building up inside. Anger mixed with fear and denial. He must talk to Merker, immediately. That same evening across town, Jabari Merker sat in his car in front of an abandoned warehouse. Next to him in the passenger seat was a folder of documents and several photographs. The last 2 weeks of the Hobbs investigation had finally borne fruit. An informant had reported a large drug shipment that would take place in 3 days. Merker finally had all the evidence he needed to request an arrest warrant. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed Lieutenant Gaines's number. "Merker, what do you got?" Her voice sounded harsh. "The information has been confirmed, Lieutenant. Delivery Thursday midnight, abandoned warehouse on Industrial Avenue. I have statements from 2 informants and photos of the previous delivery." "Good." Gaines sounded satisfied. "Get the paperwork ready for the judge tomorrow morning." "Where's Coltrane?" Merker hesitated. "He had a physical. Should have been over a couple hours ago, but he hasn't been in touch." "That's odd," Gaines said. "All right, we'll figure it out tomorrow. Good work, Merker." Merker hung up the phone and thought he tried to call Coltrane several times, but the young officer's phone was unavailable. It was not like him. In recent weeks, they had become close not only as colleagues, but as, what? Lovers? Partners? Merker didn't know what to call their relationship, which balanced professional and personal. He started the car and headed home, but the unsettling feeling wouldn't leave him. Something wasn't right. When Merker entered his apartment in a modest apartment building on the outskirts of Temecula, The first thing he noticed was a slight draft. The window in the living room was ajar, though he remembered exactly closing it in the morning. His hand instinctively reached for the pistol on his belt. "Don't bother," came a voice from a dark corner of the room. "It's only me." Dontavius Coltrane sat in a chair, illuminated only by the faint light of a street lamp coming through the window. His normally lively face seemed a frozen mask. "Coltrane?" Merker turned on the light. "What are you doing in my apartment? How'd you get in?" "You have a lousy lock," Coltrane replied without a smile. "A detective with your experience should have taken care of better security." Something in his voice made Merker tense. He slowly lowered his hand, releasing the grip of his gun, and took a step forward. "What's wrong? I've been trying to call you." "I know." Coltrane nodded. "I turned my phone off. I needed to think." "About what?" "A lot of things." Coltrane stood up and walked over to the coffee table where a vial of pills lay. "Like this. What are those, Jabari? Vitamins, is that what you said?" Merker's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the orange vial, his antiretrovirals, which he usually kept in the bathroom. "You went through my stuff?" His voice had gotten rougher. "And you've been lying to me this whole time?" Coltrane parried, his eyes glittering with restrained emotion. "Triovada, a specific drug. You know what I found out today, Jabari? I'm HIV positive." The words hung in the air, heavy as lead. Merker closed his eyes for a moment, as if in physical pain. "Dontavius, Don't you dare," Coltrane interrupted him. "Don't you dare say you're sorry or that you didn't know. These pills," he held up a vial, "say otherwise. You knew your status. You were on medication, and you didn't tell me." Merker took a deep breath. "Sit down, please. Let's talk calmly." "Calmly?" Coltrane's voice trembled. "You ruined my life, and you want to talk calmly?" "I didn't ruin your life," Merker said firmly. "HIV today is a chronic disease, not a death sentence. We're going to be—" "We," Coltrane laughed bitterly. "There is no we, Jabari. You betrayed my trust. You put me at risk without my consent. I'm on medication." Merker tried to speak calmly, though his insides clenched with the realization of disaster. "My viral load has been undetectable for years. The risk of transmission is minimal, practically zero." "Virtually zero," Coltrane repeated. "But not zero. And you made that decision for me. You didn't give me the chance to choose for myself whether that risk was worth taking." Merker stepped toward him, but Coltrane backed away. "I was afraid," Merker admitted. "Afraid of losing you. Afraid you'd turn on me if you found out. And instead, you decided to put me at risk." Coltrane shook his head. "Do you know what the worst part is? If you'd told me right away, I wouldn't have turned away. I fell in love with you, Jabari. I would have understood. We could have been more careful." His words were like a knife in Merker's heart. Loved, past tense. It was over. "Don, please," Merker made another attempt. "We can get through this together. Modern treatments are effective. Your life isn't over. Our relationship ended the moment you decided to hide the truth from me." Coltrane cut him off. "How can I trust you now? How can I believe anything you say?" At that moment, Merker's cell phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Darius Baptiste. Strange, Baptiste never called him after work. "You'd better answer it," Coltrane said coldly. "Maybe it's important." Merker hesitated, but then answered. "Merker." "Good evening, Detective." Baptiste's voice was too cheerful for a late call. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything intimate. What do you want, Baptiste?" "Oh, just to share a little discovery. I happened to see you and young Officer Coltrane last week, in that little motel on the edge of town. Interesting place for a work meeting, don't you think?" The blood drained from Merker's face. He turned his back to Coltrane, lowering his voice. "What do you want? What do—" "Nothing yet," Baptiste replied nonchalantly. "I just wanted you to know that I know. And Captain Rodriguez will probably be interested in this information. And so will the Ethics Committee. 2 officers meeting in secret, one of whom is the mentor of the other. Unethical, don't you think?" "Is this blackmail, Baptiste?" "Blackmail is such a harsh word," Baptiste laughed. "Let's call it insurance for the future. When I need your help, I'll let you know. In the meantime, enjoy the evening with your partner." The line cut off, and Merker slowly put the phone down. Coltrane looked at him questioningly. What else? Baptiste, Merker answered briefly. He saw us together, threatened to tell Rodriguez. Coltrane ran his hand over his face. It's beautiful. That's just fine. Now my career is threatened on both sides. We can handle Baptiste, Merker said confidently. I have my suspicions about his ties to Hobbs, if I can prove it. Stop saying we, Coltrane almost shouted. There is no we anymore. You've ruined everything. I didn't mean for this to happen, Merker said quietly. I never meant to hurt you. I cared about you, Dontavius. I still do. Cared enough to put me at mortal risk? Coltrane grinned bitterly. You know what the ironic thing is? I've dreamed of a career in the police force since I was a kid. I thought I'd serve and protect. And now? I'm an HIV-positive cop who hides his orientation and is being blackmailed by a corrupt detective a wonderful future. You can still have that future, Merker insisted. HIV won't stop you from being a great cop. And Baptiste, Enough! Coltrane pounded his fist on the wall. You don't understand. This isn't just about a virus or blackmail. This is about trust. You lied to me. You put me at risk without my consent. How can I be with someone I can't trust? Merker lowered his eyes. I wanted to tell you many times, but I was afraid of losing you. And I lost you anyway, Coltrane said bitterly. Only now I'm infected. There was a heavy silence. The two men stood a few feet apart, separated not only by physical distance, but by a gulf of pain and betrayal. What are you going to do? Merker finally asked. I don't know, Coltrane answered honestly. I just found out today. I'm still trying to realize that my life will never be the same. Don, Don't call me that, Coltrane interrupted him sharply. You've lost that right. Merker nodded, accepting it. Coltrane, I'm really sorry, and I want to help, in any way I can. I have experience living with this diagnosis, connections to good doctors. I don't need your help. Coltrane cut me off. I needed your respect and honesty, but it's too late now. He headed for the door, but Merker caught his arm. Please don't leave like that. Let's talk. Let your anger out. Yell at me if you have to, but don't leave with this pain inside. Coltrane looked at Merker's hand holding his, then into the older detective's eyes. Let me go, he said quietly, but with such steel in his voice that Merker involuntarily unclenched his fingers. I'll call you tomorrow, Merker said, when we've both calmed down a little. Don't. Coltrane shook his head. I don't want to talk to you. Not tomorrow, not ever. But we're still colleagues, Merker reminded him. We have a job to do, the Hobbs case. To hell with the Hobbs case, Coltrane said. To hell with you, to hell with everything. He turned to leave, but stopped abruptly and turned back to Merker. You know what the lousy part is? I really loved you. I thought I'd found someone special, someone to share my life with despite all the challenges. And now I just feel used and betrayed. I love you too, Merker said quietly. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, Coltrane replied. And now we'll both have to live with the consequences. He headed for the door again, but Merker couldn't let him go like that, with all that pain and anger. He grabbed his arm again, harder this time. Coltrane, please! The young officer pulled free sharply. Don't touch me, he shouted. Don't you ever touch me again. Calm down. Merker held up his hands. I just want to help. I can tell you about treatment, about coping with the diagnosis. How can you help me? Coltrane's voice shook with barely contained emotion. You ruined my life. I didn't ruin your life, Merker insisted, taking a step forward. I've been living with this for 8 years. It's not over. We can... Shut up! Coltrane shoved him in the chest. Just shut up! You don't understand! I trusted you. I loved you. And you... His words turned into an unintelligible scream of rage, and he shoved Merker again, harder. The older detective staggered back, but didn't resist, realizing that Coltrane needed to let his emotions out. It's okay, he said quietly. Let it out. I deserve it. Those words only seemed to add fuel to the fire. Coltrane lunged at Merker with a growl, grabbing him by the pecs and pinning him against the wall. Don't tell me what I want! He shouted, his face contorted with pain and anger. You have no right to tell me what is good and what is not! Merker didn't resist, allowing Coltrane to keep himself pinned against the wall. You're right. he said quietly. "I don't have the right. It's my fault. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." "But you didn't!" Coltrane slammed his fist on the wall next to Merker's head. "You lied to me! All this time!" "I was afraid," Merker admitted. "Afraid of losing you." "And now you've lost me forever," Coltrane replied. And there was not only rage in his voice, but deep, overwhelming pain. In the corner of the room stood a heavy glass vase, a gift from Merker's former partner for his promotion to detective. Coltrane, not realizing what he was doing, grabbed it and threw it against the wall with force. The vase shattered, shards flying all over the room. "Dontavius," Merker stepped forward, holding out his hand. "Please calm down. Don't tell me what to do." Coltrane grabbed one of the large vase shards, raising it threateningly. "Don't you dare tell me how I should feel." "I'm not trying to." Merker spoke calmly, though anxiety was building inside. He had never seen Coltrane in such a state. "I just want you not to hurt yourself. Put the glass down, please." "Hurt myself?" Coltrane laughed bitterly. "I've already hurt myself. The moment I trusted you, the moment I allowed myself to love you." Merker took another step forward, trying to speak softly and soothingly. "I know you feel betrayed and cheated, and you're right. I have let you down, but please put the glass down. We can talk about all this." "I don't want to talk!" Coltrane shouted. "I want you to feel a tenth of the pain I feel." He took a step forward, still clutching the sharp shard. Merker backed away slowly, keeping his eyes on his hand. "Don, you don't want to do this." His voice was firm but calm. "You're a police officer. You're sworn to protect, not harm." Those words seemed to reach some part of Coltrane's mind. He looked at the shard in his hand, then at Merker, and his face contorted with the realization of what he was about to do. He unclenched his fingers, and the glass fell to the floor with a clink. "God," he whispered, backing away. "What's happening to me?" "You're in shock," Merker said softly, approaching cautiously. "This is a normal reaction. Sit down, please. I'll make you some tea or—" "Stay back." Coltrane held up a hand, stopping him. "Just stay away from me." His voice shook and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. He looked lost, broken, and it was breaking Merker's heart. "Okay." Merker paused. "I'll stay away. But please don't leave in this state. Stay. Talk to me." "Talk?" Coltrane was starting to get hot again. "What should we talk about, Jabari? How you betrayed my trust. How you put your own desires before my health. How you may have ruined my career." "Your career is not ruined," Merker said firmly. "HIV status doesn't interfere with being a police officer, and as far as Baptiste is concerned—" "Enough!" Coltrane exploded again. "Stop talking like you know what I'm going through. Stop talking like everything's gonna be okay." He grabbed a heavy ashtray off the table and threw it at Merker. He barely ducked in time, and the ashtray smashed into the wall behind him. "Dontavius, please." Merker held up his hands. "I understand your anger, but—" He didn't have time to finish the sentence. Coltrane lunged at him with a fierce shout, knocking him to the ground. They fell to the floor, knocking over a coffee table. Coltrane was on top of him, his eyes wild, and his hands clenched into fists. "You've ruined everything!" he shouted, delivering blow after blow. "Everything! My life, my career, my future!" Merker tried to defend himself, blocking the blows but not answering them. He didn't want to hurt Coltrane, realizing he was acting out of character. "Dontavius, stop!" He tried to grab Coltrane's arms. "This isn't going to solve the problem." But Coltrane didn't hear. He was completely at the mercy of his rage and pain. For a moment, his hand fumbled on the floor for a heavy glass ashtray that had fallen from the table. Without realizing what he was doing, he grabbed it and struck Merker on the head with force. There was a thud, and Merker collapsed beneath him. The ashtray fell out of Coltrane's hand, and he froze, staring at the motionless body beneath him. Blood oozed slowly from the wound on Merker's temple, spreading across the floor. "Jabari?" Coltrane whispered, suddenly realizing what had happened. "Jabari, wake up." He shook Merker by the shoulder, but he didn't react. With trembling fingers, Coltrane felt for a pulse on Merker's neck. Nothing. He tried again, desperately searching for signs of life, in vain. "No," he breathed, crawling away from the body. "No, no, no." The reality of what he had done came crashing down on him like a ton of bricks. He had killed a man, killed Jabari Merker, a police detective, his lover, his mentor. Coltrane stared at the lifeless body in front of him, unable to believe it had actually happened. His hands were covered in Merker's blood. His life, already ruined by today's diagnosis, was now permanently destroyed. Thursday morning began unusually quiet at the Temecula Police Department. Detective Ramon Carlos, a stocky man with graying hair, tried twice to reach Merker, but the phone stubbornly switched to voicemail. That wasn't like him, especially with a meeting scheduled for today with the judge in the Hobbs case. Had anyone seen Merker? Carlos asked, looking around the office. Not today, one of the officers answered. Maybe he overslept? Merker? Carlos grinned. That guy is never late. Lieutenant Shanika Gaines, who was observing the scene from her office, frowned. She, too, had tried twice to contact Merker. Glancing at her watch, she made a decision. Carlos, go to his house, she ordered. Maybe he's sick and can't answer. 40 minutes later, the Temecula police radio station blared a message. Officer needs backup, possible homicide. Address is 27 Pine Street, apartment 16. Gaines was one of the first to arrive on the scene. Police cars had already cordoned off the area, and Merker's neighbors were gathered in the courtyard, whispering and filming what was happening on their phones. She quickly made her way into the building and up to the third floor, where she was met by a pale Carlos. What happened? She asked, already guessing the answer. He's dead, Lieutenant, Carlos replied deftly. Merker's dead. Looks like a severe blow to the head. The body's in the living room. Gaines took a deep breath, preparing herself for what she was about to see. No matter how long you've been on the force, the death of a colleague always hits in a special way. Merker's apartment was modest and neat, much like the detective himself. The living room, however, was a picture of chaos. An overturned coffee table, a broken vase, shards of glass on the floor. And at the center of the destruction was the body of Jabari Merker, lying on his back with a frozen expression of surprise on his face. The blow had struck his temple, leaving a deep gash around which blood had dried. The medical examiner is on his way, Carlos said. I didn't touch anything, just checked for a pulse. Gaines nodded as she slowly walked around the scene. Looks like a struggle, she observed. A lot of broken glass. Anything missing? Not at first glance, Carlos answered. Wallet's still there, watch too. Doesn't look like a robbery. So it's personal. Gaines paused at the broken glass ashtray next to the body. Presumed murder weapon? Probably, Carlos agreed. There's blood on it, and I think there's hair. Gaines mentally ran through the list of suspects. Merker had some tough cases, especially those involving the drug dealer Hobbs. Call Coltrane, she ordered. He worked with Merker on the Hobbs case. He should know where the investigation stood and who might have wanted Merker dead. He's not answering, Carlos reported after a moment. Neither did Merker this morning. Gaines frowned even harder. Find him. Now. The next 2 hours turned into organized chaos. Forensics officers photographed and collected evidence. Patrol officers interviewed neighbors, and Gaines coordinated the investigation while simultaneously trying to deal with her own shock. Merker was one of her best detectives, quiet and reliable. His murder had hit not only the morale of the department, but also her personal pride in the safety of her men. Coltrane showed up at headquarters around noon, pale, with reddened eyes and nervous movements. Gaines watched him through the blinds of her office, noting the oddities in his behavior. The normally collected and neat young officer looked as if he had been up all night. Officer Coltrane, she called out. Come in. Coltrane walked into her office, keeping a straight face, but his hands were visibly shaking. Have you heard of Detective Merker? Gaines asked bluntly. Yes, ma'am. His voice was hoarse. Officer Johnson told me when I arrived. It's awful. Where were you last night? Coltrane froze for a moment before answering. At home, Lieutenant. I wasn't feeling well after my physical. Took a sleeping pill and went to bed early. Can anyone confirm that? No, ma'am. Coltrane swallowed. I live alone. Gaines scrutinized his face, something in his eyes, fear, guilt, or just the shock of losing a coworker, made her inner detective radar go off. When was the last time you saw Merker? Yesterday afternoon, before my physical, Coltrane answered, avoiding a direct look. We were discussing the Hobbs case. And how was the physical? Gaines asked abruptly. Coltrane flinched as if struck by a blow. Normal, he said. Just routine. I see. Gaines leaned back in her chair. Officer Coltrane, given your work with Merker, can you think of anyone who would want him dead? Latrell Hobbs, Coltrane answered without hesitation. Merker was close to indicting him. He had compelling evidence about an impending large drug shipment. Who else knew about the investigation? Not many. Coltrane began listing names, and Gaines noted that his voice became more confident as the conversation turned professional. You, Captain Rodriguez, a few officers from narcotics, and possibly Detective Baptiste. He's taken a lot of interest in our progress. Baptiste? Gaines raised an eyebrow. He doesn't work narcotics. Why was he interested in your investigation? Coltrane hesitated. I don't know, ma'am. Maybe just curiosity. Gaines made a note in her notebook. All right, officer, you're free to go, but don't leave town. I may need additional statements. Yes, ma'am. Coltrane stood up. Can I help with the investigation? No. Gaines cut him off. You're too close to the victim. You're too close to the victim. You're too close to the victim. Coltrane nodded and walked out, and Gaines was left alone, pondering the inconsistencies in his behavior. Something was wrong here, and she intended to find out what it was. The investigation fell into three main areas. First was Latrell Hobbs, who had an obvious motive to get rid of the detective who was uncovering his drug network. 2. An internal enemy, possibly related to corruption in the department, and here Baptiste's name came up more than once. And 3. Merker's personal life, which, as it turned out, no one really knew anything about. Merker lived like a ghost, Detective Carlos reported after interviewing his colleagues. No one went to his house. No one knew about his family or friends. He came to work, did his job, and left. Everyone has a right to privacy, Gaines said, but in this case, that secrecy makes our job harder. She requested access to Merker's personnel file, including medical records. Normally that information was confidential, but the officer's death under suspicious circumstances gave her the right to make such a request. Merker's medical records proved to be a revelation. He had been diagnosed with HIV 8 years ago and had been on regular treatment since then. His viral load was undetectable. Modern therapy had worked effectively. But the fact remained that Merker hid his status from his colleagues. At the same time, Gaines ordered her to check the calls on Merker's cell phone in recent weeks. One number caught her attention. Frequent calls and texts from Coltrane's phone, and not just during business hours. The last call was from Baptiste, less than an hour before his estimated time of death. Bring Baptiste to me, Gaines ordered. Darius Baptiste entered Gaines's office with the confident smile of a man used to getting away with things. What can I do for you, Lieutenant? He asked, sitting down in the chair uninvited. You called Merker the night before he died, Gaines said. What was the conversation about? Baptiste shrugged. Work stuff. We crossed paths on the Jenkins case. That's odd. Gaines checked the records. The Jenkins case was closed 3 weeks ago, and you never worked with Merker directly. Baptiste fidgeted in his chair. Well, maybe I got the case wrong. I've got a lot of work to do, you know. I'm sure you do. Gaines stepped forward. Detective Baptiste, I have reason to believe that you blackmailed Merker, possibly information about his personal life or his health. Baptiste's face changed from a confident smile to a wary expression. These are serious allegations, Lieutenant. Do you have proof? I'm working on it, Gaines smiled. In the meantime, tell me more about your relationship with Latrell Hobbs. Baptiste turned pale. I don't know any Hobbs. You don't? Your bank account says otherwise. Regular receipts from MG Consulting, which happens to be owned by Hobbs's cousin. Coincidence? I want a lawyer, Baptiste responded instantly. Of course you do, Gaines nodded. That's your right. But be warned, cooperating now may mitigate your situation later. Baptiste hesitated, clearly weighing his options. All right, he finally said. I did receive money for information on police raids and investigations, but I didn't kill Merker. Why would I do that? He was, useful. Useful? I knew things about him, Baptiste admitted. About his personal life, and I used it as insurance for the future. I don't need Merker dead. What exactly did you know? Baptiste smirked. Our model detective was leading a double life. He was gay, Lieutenant. And not just gay, he was dating a young Officer Coltrane. I saw them together at a motel outside of town. Perfect blackmail material, considering how much Merker valued his reputation. Gaines hid her surprise. That would explain the frequent calls and texts between Merker and Coltrane. And you called him tonight to blackmail him? Just letting him know I knew his secret. Baptiste shrugged. It wasn't a big deal. He was pissed off but alive when we finished talking. Who else knew about his relationship with Coltrane? I have no idea. Baptiste hesitated. Hobbs, maybe? He and Merker obviously had some old score to settle. Hobbs liked to hint at Merker's personal life. Gaines let Baptiste go, but had him under surveillance. The puzzle was starting to come together, but the key pieces were still missing. Meanwhile, forensics found clothing fibers in Merker's apartment that didn't belong to him and a partial shoe print in dried blood, a size that matched Coltrane's shoes. The medical examiner's report confirmed that death was caused by a blow to the head with a heavy object, probably a glass ashtray found at the scene. Gaines decided to check on one last detail. She called Dr. Morton, who had performed a physical on Coltrane. What did Officer Coltrane's tests show? She asked without preamble. Morton looked confused. Lieutenant, that information is confidential. Doctor, I have a murder of a police officer on my hands. Gaines interrupted him sternly. I'm requesting this information as part of the investigation. Morton gave up. Officer Coltrane was tested positive for HIV antibodies. Confirmation test is pending, but preliminary results are positive. When did you tell him that? The same night he came in for his appointment, at about 9 o'clock in the evening, Morton replied. He was shocked, which is natural. He left without listening to my recommendations. Gaines thanked the doctor and let him go. Now the picture was clear. Coltrane had found out about his HIV status, probably connected it with Merker, and in a state of emotional distress went to him to clarify the relationship. The confrontation escalated into physical violence and ended in murder. She called Coltrane into the interview room. The young officer looked even worse than he had that morning, haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and nervous movements. Officer Coltrane, Gaines began, I checked your alibi that you were home alone all evening. Unfortunately, several facts contradict what you say. What facts? Coltrane asked hoarsely. Fibers from your clothing were found at the crime scene, a partial print of your shoe size in Merker's blood, and, she paused, Dr. Morton confirmed that he informed you that you tested positive for HIV the evening before the murder. Coltrane froze, his hands clenched into fists. I didn't kill him, he whispered. Then explain to me. Gaines stepped forward. Why did you lie about your movements? Why did you hide the fact that you were in Merker's apartment? Yeah, Coltrane stammered. I was indeed there, but when I left, he was alive. You were furious, weren't you? Gaines insisted. You just learned of your diagnosis. You suspected you'd been infected by Merker. You went to him for an explanation. Yes, Coltrane admitted. I was angry. We'd been seeing each other for months. He never told me his status. I trusted him and His voice shook. And what happened at the apartment? We had a fight. He admitted he knew his status, but claimed his viral load was undetectable, that the risk of transmission was minimal. But that didn't matter to me. It was about the trust he had betrayed. And in the course of that argument, you hit him over the head with an ashtray, Gaines finished. No! Coltrane exclaimed. I mean, I don't remember. I was frantic. We were fighting. Everything around us was breaking. He put his hands over his face. God, what have I done? Gaines watched him in silence. Coltrane lifted his head, and tears stood in his eyes. I didn't mean to kill him, he said quietly. I loved him no matter what. I just wanted him to feel some of the pain I felt. Officer Dontavius Coltrane, Gaines said formally. You're under arrest for the murder of Detective Jabari Merker. You have the right to remain silent. While she read out the rights, Coltrane sat motionless, as if petrified. When officers entered the room to escort him to his cell, he didn't resist, just stood up and held out his hands for the handcuffs. I deserve this, he whispered. I ruined everything. 3 weeks after Merker's murder, Shanika Gaines stood at his grave in the city cemetery. The farewell ceremony was modest. Few co-workers, no relatives. Merker had indeed lived as a ghost, a lonely man whose death left behind more questions than answers. The investigation ended with Coltrane confessing to manslaughter. An emotional breakdown, triggered by the shock of the diagnosis and a sense of betrayal, led to a tragedy that cost one man his life and another his freedom. The Baptiste case turned out to be an unexpected bonus. Merker's blackmail was just the tip of the iceberg. The investigation revealed a long-running corruption scheme linking the detective to several of the city's criminal gangs, including Hobbs' organization. Baptiste made a deal with the investigation, turning in his associates in exchange for a reduced sentence. Latrell Hobbs, oddly enough, avoided arrest this time around. The evidence gathered by Merker was insufficient without his testimony, and the information from Baptiste involved only old operations. But Gaines had put Hobbs under close surveillance. His time would come. "We should have noticed," Gaines said quietly, looking at the fresh gravesite. There were signs. Merker was becoming increasingly withdrawn. Coltrane was too attached to him for mere mentoring. Baptiste was getting cockier. We missed it all because we didn't want to see. Standing next to her was Captain Rodriguez, who only shook his head. "Don't blame yourself, Shanika. We can't control every officer's personal life." "It's not about control," Gaines countered. "It's about culture." Merker felt he had to hide both his orientation and his HIV status. He was afraid it would ruin his career. And in a way, he was right. Baptiste used it against him. "What's going to happen to Coltrane?" Rodriguez asked. "The lawyer is negotiating manslaughter," Gaines replied. "Given the circumstances, he could get 7 to 15 years. Probably less, given his emotional state and lack of criminal intent." She paused, looking up at the gray sky over the cemetery. "You know what the most ironic thing is? If it weren't for our prejudices, if it weren't for this atmosphere of secrecy and fear, Merker might have been open about his status. Coltrane would have known what he was dealing with. They could have taken precautions, been in a safe relationship." "The world is changing, Shanika," Rodriguez observed, "but slowly, especially in places like the police." "Too slowly," Gaines shook her head, "and the cost of this change is too high. 2 good officers lost to the system, 1 dead, 1 in jail, all because of fear and prejudice." She placed a small bouquet on Merker's grave. Simple wildflowers, nothing fancy, as simple and inconspicuous as Merker himself was when he was alive. "We must learn to tell the truth," she said, more to herself than to Rodriguez. "About ourselves, about each other, about the system in which we work. The truth is sometimes painful, but lies kill. In this case, literally." Rodriguez said nothing. They stood in silence for a few more minutes, paying a final tribute to their colleague before returning to work. Life went on. The crimes didn't stop, and somewhere in the city, new mysteries were already brewing that could one day lead to new tragedies. Before leaving, Gaines looked back at Merker's grave one last time. The wind moved the petals of the flowers as if whispering parting words. "Rest in peace, detective," she said mentally. "And forgive us for not being able to create a world where you could live openly and without fear."